Question number 63. MEC. MEC, a public limited company, is a sports organization that owns several football and basketball teams. It has a financial year end of 31st of May 16. MEC purchases and sells player registration on a regular basis. MEC must purchase the registrations for that player to play for the club. Player registrations are contractual obligations between the player and the MEC. The costs of acquiring player registrations include transfer fees, league levy fees, and player agent fees incurred by the club. Also, players' contracts can be extended, and this incurs additional costs for MEC. बढ़िया इससे पहले देख लेते करना क्या है. They discuss how the above matter should be dealt with in ME's financial statements. ठीक है. Wait. At the तो ये कहता था कि please. At the end of every season, which also is the financial year end of MEC, the club reviews its playing staff and makes decisions as to whether they wish to sell any player registration. These registrations are actively marketed by circulating other clubs with the list of player registrations and their estimated selling price. Players' registrations are also sold during the season, often with performance conditions attached. Occasionally, it becomes clear that the player will not play for the club again because of, for example, a player sustaining a career-threatening injury or being permanently removed from the playing squad for another season. For another reason, the playing registrations of the current players are sold after the year end of total proceeds net of associated cost of 25 million. These registrations had a carrying amount of 7 million. MEC would like to know financial reporting treatment of the acquisition, extension, review of the sale of players registration and the circumstances outlined above. ठीक है. In the current scenario, we can see that MEC, who is a public limited company, is a sports organization and owns various football, basketball clubs. वो सब ठीक है. Uh, at the end of every season, MEC at the end of every season, MEC reviews its playing staff and makes decisions as to whether they wish to sell the players or no. Uh, These registrations are actually marketed by circulating other clubs with a list of players. Thus, we can say that the player registrations are accounted for using IFRS 5 non-current assets held for sale, wherein certain criteria should be fulfilled. That is, the sale is expected to take place within 12 months of the asset qualified as held for sale. Uh, the asset the asset is heavily marketed by the management. The management is committed on selling the asset. Uh, Marketed. A significant reversal in the management decisions to not sell the asset will not take place. The amount at which the management is selling the product should be reasonable. एंड तो ये मैंने फिलहाल 5 रीजंस बता दिए हैं. एक बार मतलब यहाँ पर मैं चेक कर लेता हूँ और शायद कुछ 7 रीजंस थे मैं चेक करने के लिए. हम्म. Items available for immediate. अरे items are available for immediate sale in the present condition only. Sale is highly probable. बस ये 2 पॉइंट्स अपन ने नहीं बोले. एक्टिवली मार्केटेड ठीक है. एक्टिव प्रोग्राम टू लोकेट द बायर ठीक है. तो ये 2 पॉइंट्स अपन ने नहीं बोले. नहीं, actually sale probable within 12 months. Did we say that? हाँ, 12 months वाला we said that. We didn't say this item is an active program to locate the buyer. We didn't say this fourth point and the first point. But it's okay. वो 2 पॉइंट्स अपन बोल लेंगे. The active program to locate the buyer is in place and the item is available for sale in its present condition itself. Uh, Thus, in these circumstances, IFRS 5 will apply non-current asset held for sale. According to non-current asset held for sale, it will be measured at carrying amount or fair value less cost to sell, whichever is lower. ये अपन बोल देंगे. Occasionally, it becomes clear that the player will not play for the club again because of, example, a player sustaining a career-threatening injury or being permanently removed from the playing squad for another reason. In such cases, IAS 36 impairment of assets will apply, wherein the player's registrations will be impaired. In such scenario, impairment takes place when the carrying amount exceeds the recoverable amount। वह सबसे अपन बता देंगे कि इम्पेयरमेंट करते कैसे हैं। दैट द रिकवरेबल अमाउंट के केस में वी सिलेक्ट द हायर ऑफ फेयर वैल्यू लेस कॉस्ट टू सेल एंड फेयर लेस कॉस्ट टू सेल एंड वैल्यू इन यूज। वैल्यू इन यूज कैसे कैलकुलेट करेंगे इस प्लेयर में। ठीक है, अपन इतना बता देंगे। इट विल बी कंपेयर्ड विद द कैरिंग अमाउंट एंड द लोअर वैल्यू विल बी सिलेक्टेड। ईच प्लेयर रजिस्ट्रेशन विल बी considered as a CGU. However, it can be difficult to determine the value of an individual player because the players usually play in a team and thus can be represented as a corporate asset। उसके बाद like to know financial point acquisition and extension। रिव्यू ऑफ सेल ऑफ प्लेयर्स रजिस्ट्रेशन सर्कम प्लान अबाउ वो ठीक है। उसके बाद MEC purchases sells players registered on regular basis। MEC must purchase registration for that player to play the club। Player registrations are contractual obligations between the player and the MEC। So ऐसा बता देंगे कि player registrations are contractual obligations between the player and the MEC। The cost of acquiring the player registration should be capitalized। These capitalization costs should include transfer fees, legal levy fees, player agents fees incurred by the club। That is all the direct expenditure should be capitalized। It will be depreciation, it will be amortized now because it is an intangible asset। So as it is an intangible asset, it will be amortized over the contract of the player with MEC company। Players contract standard and incur additional cost। एक्चुअली अपन फिर IAS 38 का भी वो डेफिनेशन बता देंगे कि अकॉर्डिंग टू IAS 38 intangible asset is a non-monetary asset मतलब without physical substance the and the player registrations or purchase registration seems to meet this definition। ये अपन बता देंगे। तो ये तीन चार चीजें जो मैंने बोली IAS 36 38 और IFRS 5 ये तीन चीजें है कि नहीं बस वो चेक कर लेते हैं। IAS 8 आएगा क्या क्योंकि चेंज हो रहा है ना अपना एस्टिमेट की ही विल प्ले फॉर अस करके। मैं बस वो सोच रहा हूँ बट ठीक है पहले इतने तीन चीजें हैं कि नहीं पहले वो चेक कर लेते हैं। MEC कंपनी स्पोर्ट्स टीम देखो परचेज ऑफ प्लेयर रजिस्ट्रेशन देखो IAS 38 says that entity should recognize an intangible asset where it is probable that future economic benefits will flow। तो बेसिकली इन्होंने बोला कि IAS 38 को अपन रिकॉग्नाइज कब करते हैं तो वो चार क्राइटेरिया थे IAS 38 में रिकॉग्निशन के। मैं लेके जाता हूँ वहां पर और चेक करते हैं। ये देखो ये थे चार क्राइटेरिया रिकॉग्निशन के। एसेट इज आइडेंटिफाइबल कंट्रोल्ड बाय द एंटिटी generate future economic benefits for the entity and cost of the asset can be measured reliably। तो आंसर को बड़ा करने के लिए इन्होंने ये वाले पॉइंट को डाला हुआ है कि रिकॉग्निशन वाले पॉइंट को डाला हुआ है कि इस टाइम पे अपने को रिकॉग्नाइज करना होता है। उसके बाद therefore the cost associated with the acquisition of player registration should be capitalized at cost। This would include blah blah blah। The cost of the players registration would be amortized over the period covered by the players contract। ये भी अपने मतलब बिल्कुल सही से बोला। Where a playing contract is extended any cost associated with the securing the extension are added to the unamortized balance at the date of the extension। तो मतलब जब भी एक्सटेंशन होगा तो उसमें और कॉस्ट कैपिटलाइज हो जाएगी। ये वाला पॉइंट एक्चुअली वी डिडंट कवर ये दिस वाला पॉइंट बट इट वाज आस्क्ड बिलो। मेरे माइंड में आया था। आई थिंक आई जस्ट डिडंट से इट आउट लाउड। कहाँ गया एक्सटेंशन का कहीं तो बोला था ना। हाँ ये देखो एक्सटेंशन दे हैड आस्क्ड यस हियर। Extension revised carrying amount is amortized and then the revised carrying amount is amortized over the remaining revised contract life। फिर decision to sell player registrations would be classified as asset held for sale under IFRS 5 non-current asset held for sale and discontinued operation when their carrying amount is expected to be recovered principally through a sale transaction and the sale is considered to be highly probable। To qualify the registration should be actively marketed by MEC MEC, which it appears that they are, it would also appear that the management commits itself to a plan to sell the registrations and that assets are available for immediate sale. तो ये सब इन्होंने वो 5 पॉइंट्स बताए हैं बस. If the asset is held for sale, then the player registration would be measured at lower of, तो वो भी अपन ने बिल्कुल सही से बताया था, carrying amount of fair value less cost to sell में. फिर ये the gain and loss on disposal of player registrations would be determined by comparing the fair value of the consideration receivable net of any transaction cost with the carrying amount and would be recognized in the profit or loss, where a part of the consideration receivable is contingent on specified performance conditions. This amount is recognized in profit or loss when conditions are met. तो अगर कुछ कंडीशंस होंगी तो वो मीट होने पर ही अपन इस चीज को पीएनएल में रिकॉर्ड कर सकते हैं. Gain or losses on disposal registrations would be determined by comparing the fair value of the consideration receivable net any transaction cost with the carrying amount would be recognized to profit or loss. तो जो भी अपने को गेन हो रहा है, जैसे कि समझो हमने कैरिंग अमाउंट पे बेचा, मतलब हमको पड़ रहा था 18 लाख का, वो प्लेयर हमने दे दिया 19 लाख का, तो जो 1 लाख का गेन हुआ है दैट विल बी रिकॉग्नाइज्ड लेस द ट्रांजैक्शन कॉस्ट विच हैव इनकर्ड इन दिस प्रोसेस. उसको अपन पीएनएल में रिकॉर्ड करेंगे. लेकिन अगर कुछ परफॉर्मेंस कंडीशन सेटिस्फाइड इन्वॉल्व है, जो जो यूजुअली शायद होती नहीं है, कि अगर एक प्लेयर ने अच्छा परफॉर्म किया तो हम ये रखेंगे वरना हम आपको फिर से दे देंगे, ऐसा यूजुअली फुटबॉल्स और बास्केटबॉल गेम्स में नहीं होता है. इट इज इन्वॉल्व इन F1 रेसिंग मोस्टली. बट ठीक है, वेयर अ पार्ट ऑफ द कंसिडरेशन रिसीवेबल इज कंtingent ऑन स्पेसिफाइड परफॉर्मेंस कंडीशंस, दिस अमाउंट इज रिकॉग्नाइज्ड इन प्रॉफिट और लॉस व्हेन कंडीशंस आर मेट. फिर आता है इम्पेयरमेंट इश्यूज. तो ये देखो, IAS 36 इम्पेयरमेंट स्टेज एसेट इज इम्पेयर्ड. तो इन्होंने बोला कि इम्पेयरमेंट कैसे, मतलब कब किया जाता है. देन इट इज डिफिकल्ट टू डिटरमाइन द वैल्यू इन यूज. सी इवन इवन वी वर finding it difficult to determine the value in use. So इन्होंने बोला कि it is difficult to determine the value in use of an individual player in isolation of that player cannot generate cash flows. तो इसलिए मैंने बोला कि अपन सीजू इधर ट्रीट कर सकते हैं, लेकिन वो लाइक एक टीम होती है ना बेसिकली ऐसा. As such, impairments may need to be performed on the cash generating unit to which the player belongs. This is likely to be the team as a whole. There may be some circumstances where a player is taken out of the team, such as if they sustain a career threatening injury. If such circumstances arise, the carrying amount of the player should be assessed against the best estimate of the player's fair value less cost to sell. Player should be estimated against the best estimate of the player's fair value less cost to sell. An impairment loss would be charged to profit or loss. An impairment charge loss would be charged to profit or loss. वो आई थिंक बेसिक ही है कि इम्पेयरमेंट पीएनएल में जाता है. वी डिडंट से इट बट आई जस्ट थॉट कि वो इम्पोर्टेंट नहीं होगा. द प्लेइंग registrations which are disposed of subsequent to year end for 25 million would be disclosed as the event after the reporting period. एक मिनट, disclosed of subsequent playing registration of certain players were sold after. Oh, we didn't cover this point. The player registration of certain players were sold after the year end. हमने कुछ players को after the year end बेचा था, इसके हमें net proceeds मिले थे 25 million. These registrations had a carrying amount of 7 million. तो the playing registrations which were disposed of subsequent to the year end for 25 million would be disclosed as an event after the reporting period. So we have to say that point also. Okay, next part. In the consolidated financial statement for the year 2016, MEs recognized net deferred tax asset of 16 million. The asset was made up of 3 million relating to taxable temporary differences and 19 million relating to carry forward of unused tax losses. Okay. The local tax regulation allows unused tax losses to be carried forward indefinitely. MEs expects that within 5 years, future taxable profits before tax would be available against which the unused tax losses could be offset. This view is based on the budgets for the years 2016 to 2021. The budgets were primarily based on general assumptions about economic environment indicators. General assumptions, ये भी एक अच्छा point है. Additionally, the entity expected a substantial reduction in the future impairments that the entity has recently suffered, and this would result in substantial increase in the future taxable profits. MES has recognized material losses during the previous 5 years with an average annual loss of 19 million. The comparison of ME's budgeted results for the previous 2 years to its actual results indicated material differences principal to impairment losses. In the interim financial statements for the first half of the year, 31st of March 16, MEs recognized impairment losses equal to the budgeted impairment losses for the whole year. Behan showed, sorry, in this financial statements for the year ended 31st of May 16, MEs disclosed material uncertainty about its ability to continue as a going concern. The current tax rate in its jurisdiction is 30%, by sub. So, according to IAS 12, income taxes, it allows a deferred tax to be recognized for the unused tax losses for the period the local tax jurisdiction allow or the tax jurisdiction allows. In the current scenario, oh sorry, उस सब के पहले, however, the unused tax losses can only be recognized on the amount that is probable that the future taxable profits will be available. In the current scenario, the local tax regulation allows the unused tax losses to be carried forward indefinitely. However, the chances of future taxable profits are quite slim because the current unused tax losses are a clear evidence that future taxable profits might not be available. It expects that within 5 years, future taxable profits before tax would be available. It is too long of a period to recognize the future taxable profits. Um, Also, the fact that the future taxable profits are based upon the budgets, primarily based on the general assumptions about economic environment indicators. However, they should be industry specific and especially company specific assumptions. Additionally, the entity expected a substantial reduction. Uh, एक मिनट हाँ, a substantial reduction in the future impairments that the entity had recently suffered is a good assumption to keep, that such impairments won't take in the future, and this is a reliable assumption to keep, would result in a sustainable increase, and thus the company stated that this would result in a sustainable increase in the future taxable profit. Comments material losses, remember. Um, this can be backed up by stating that the comparison of ME's budgeted results for previous 2 years with actual results in also indicated material differences relating to principally to impairment losses. Thus, we can say that these unused tax losses were one-off losses that usually really related to impairment. However, questions can be asked about the management's assumptions at the first place about the asset that it had to be impaired so much. लाइक मैनेजमेंट ने इतना पहले इनिशियल कॉस्ट पे क्या ही रिकॉग्नाइज किया कि अभी इम्पेयरमेंट करवाना पड़ रहा है, लाइक ऐसे इतना कौन सा बड़ा अमाउंट उन्होंने चार्ज करवाया था ऐसा. However, in the current scenario, we can see that in the first half of the year itself, ME's company has recognized impairment losses equal to the budgeted impairment losses for the whole year. Thus, the assumption about the impairment losses being reduced was not a reliable assumption to keep, and which has also led to a decrease in the taxable profits. Which will lead to a decrease in the future taxable profits. Further, thus this is not a reliable assumption to keep, and क्या बोल सकते हैं कि thus the recognition of deferred tax of 19 million for unused tax losses is invalid. This can further be backed by the scenario that for that according to the year end 31st of March 16, ME's disclosed a material uncertainty about its ability to continue as a going concern. Thus, for the year end, there can be a scenario where the financial statements have to be prepared on breakup basis in accordance with IAS 1 presentation of financial statements. इतना अपन बता देंगे. काफी ज्यादा अपन ने पता है क्या कि ये क्वेश्चन को रीड करते 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 अपने आंसर बना दिया. सो वो कुछ कुछ पॉइंट्स अपने को वहीं से कॉपी पेस्ट करने हैं नीचे आंसर में. ठीक है ना. आ जाओ चेक करते हैं. IAS 12 income taxes states that deferred tax shall be recognized for the carry forward of unused tax losses to the extent that it is probable that future taxable profits will be available against unused tax losses can be utilized. तो ये अपन ने पूरा perfectly point बोला. IS 12 explains that existence of unused tax losses is a strong evidence that future taxable profits may not be available. ये बहुत ही important line है जो अपन ने बोली. Therefore, when an entity has history of recent losses, the entity recognizes a deferred tax asset arising from the unused tax losses only to the extent that the entity has sufficient taxable temporary differences, or when there is convincing other evidence that sufficient taxable profit will be available against which unused tax losses can be utilized by the entity. उन्होंने सेम ही चीज बोली है कि taxable profits जो है वो अवेलेबल होनी चाहिए in order to offset the ये tax the unused tax losses which have been recognized as a deferred tax. MEs recognized losses during the previous 5 years in order to use the deferred tax asset of 16 million. MEs would have to recognize profit of 53.3 million at the existing rate of 30%. Basically उन्होंने क्या किया, उन्होंने रिवर्स कैलकुलेशन लगाया ये कहते हुए कि 16 मिलियन कैसे होगा. तो इफ वी सी 53.3 मिलियन इंटू पॉइंट 30% करोगे तो अपने को आएगा 15.99 विच इज 16 मिलियन. तो बेसिकली अपने को इतना प्रॉफिट कमाना पड़ेगा कि अपन ऑफसेट कर पाए. ये बस उन्होंने एग्जाम्पल की तरह बताया हुआ है. इन कंपैरिजन द एंटिटी रिकॉग्नाइज एन एवरेज लॉस ऑफ 19 मिलियन पर ईयर ड्यूरिंग द ईयर्स 5. ये तो इन्होंने खाली ऐसे लाइन डालने के लिए डाली हुई है. प्लस वो जो रिवर्स कैलकुलेशन भी अप्लाई किया, आई डोंट नो इट इज रिक्वायर्ड और नॉट, बट इट इज अ स्मार्ट वे टू इंक्रीज द पैराग्राफ. ME's budgets and assumptions are not convincing that other evidence because entity does not appear to have been capable of making accurate forecasts in the past, and there are material differences between the amounts budgeted and realized for the previous 2 years. ME has presented future budgets primarily based on general assumptions about economic environment indicators rather than what was expected to influence future income and therefore enabled to use the deferred tax asset. तो इन्होंने खाली जनरल अजम्पशंस यूज किए थे जो कि गलत बात थी. अपन ने इंडस्ट्री स्पेसिफिक बोला है विच इज ओके, लेकिन इन्होंने बोला है दोज अजम्पशंस आल्सो विच विल विच इन्फ्लुएंस द फ्यूचर इनकम. ऐसा आगे. IS2 states that in assessing the probability that taxable profit will be available against which the unused tax losses or unused tax credits can be utilized, the consideration is whether the unused tax losses result from identifiable causes which are unlikely to recur. That is one of events. तो अब तो मैंने तो डायरेक्टली वन ऑफ इवेंट्स बोला था, बट अपन वन ऑफ इवेंट्स बोल के फिर ब्रैकेट में डाल सकते हैं कि दोज दोज आइटम्स और दोज expenses that are not going to incur or recur in the future or again and again are not going to happen. ऐसा. However, MES has continued to recognize impairment losses in excess of the budget. This places doubts on the likelihood of future profits arising. Finally, in the financial statements, ME disclosed a material uncertainty about its ability to continue as a going concern. This again places doubts on the likelihood of the future profits and suggests that recognition of the deferred tax asset for unused tax losses would be inappropriate. In conclusion, the liability of 3 million relating to temporary differences can be offset against against the 3 million unused tax losses. No further deferred tax asset relating to tax losses should be recognized. उन्होंने क्लियरली बोला हुआ है कि अनयूज्ड टैक्स लॉसेस के लिए अपन कुछ भी रिकॉग्नाइज नहीं कर सकते, लेकिन जो 3 मिलियन की लायबिलिटी है उसके लिए हम लोग उस चीज को ऑफसेट कर सकते हैं. दैट्स इट. मतलब अपन 16 मिलियन नहीं रिकॉग्नाइज कर सकते, लेकिन 3 मिलियन के साथ 3 मिलियन ऑफसेट कर सकते हैं. इतना ही बोला हुआ है. दे हैव नॉट इंक्लूडेड दिस पॉइंट कि इम्पेयरमेंट लॉसेस हमारे हाफ ईयर में ही पूरे साल के बजटेड है, बट इट इज इंपॉर्टेंट ये वाला पॉइंट डालना. Hmm. Question number B. Developing a framework for disclosures is at the forefront of the current debate, and there are many bodies around the world attempting to establish an overarching framework to make financial statement disclosures more effective, coordinated, and less redundant. Some argue that disclosure notes are too lengthy and numerous. Others argue that there is no such thing as too much useful information for users. Discuss why is it important to ensure that optimal level of disclosures in annual reports and the role of materiality when preparing financial statement of disclosure notes. तो पहले बार materiality पे आ जाते हैं. Any according to the conceptual framework, any information that is material, any material information नहीं नहीं, according to conceptual framework, any information is material if omitting, obscuring, or misstating the information would influence the decisions of the users. According to the conceptual framework, materiality is a fundamental principle which should be used while giving disclosures or while giving disclosures. This is because only the material information should be disclosed to in the financial statements, thus saves time of the investors by not so that investors will not uh, prioritize the work which is immaterial to the company. Um, the company. Huh. Determining materiality is judgmental, and thus management judgment plays a key role. Plays a key role. If management's judgment is too low, then this might lead to excessive material information being disclosed in the financial statements, and thus creating a clutter in the disclosure paragraph of the financial statements. This might lead to investors not being able to uh, pinpoint or not being able to utilize their time on the scenarios that actually requires their help or requires their attention. Or if the management keeps their materiality level too high, then this might lead to very few information being available for the investors to make their decision about whether or not to invest in the company. ठीक है, तो ये दोनों चीजों को कंसिडर करना चाहिए. Now, discuss what is important to ensure optimal level of disclosure. There is no specific numerical points that or numerical limitations that certain disclosures should be given or not. Certain disclosure notes should be given or not. Giving disclosure notes is a part of management judgment. However, it should be ensured that disclosures are given in the optimal level so that the disclosures paragraph in the annual report is not monotonous to the investors. If अभी और क्या बोल सकता हूँ मैं, दिस इज मोनोटोनस, मैं कहीं ना कहीं सेम पॉइंट्स पे आ ही जा रहा हूँ. The disclosure paragraph should be concise and include all the relevant information which is important for the management to reach out to the investors. Uh, The statements that some argue that the disclosures are too lengthy and numerous, while others argue that there is no such thing as too much useful information. This is because looking at the disclosure notes or assessing the disclosures note is a matter of subjectivity. That is, it differs from person to person and from investor to investor. And forefront debate. The disclosure no should not be generic in nature. If the disclosure notes are too generic in nature, then the investors might argue that the company has not put in efforts into disclosing their notes, because this general information might be available outside in the industry as well. लाइक जो इन्फॉर्मेशन मेरे को बाहर मिल रही है, वो ही अगर मेरे को ये लोग दे रहे तो फायदा नहीं है ना, इन्वेस्टर्स या इन्वेस्टर्स को इन्वेस्टर्स या फिर यूजर्स को भी, इन दैट मैटर कस्टमर्स वगैरह होंगे उनको. और क्या हो सकता है? कंसाइज बोल दिया, जजमेंट भी बोल दिया. अरे मेन पॉइंट, the disclosure notes in the annual reports should include the risks and opportunities which the entity faces in the near future, because the financial statement information helps the investors in analyzing what has happened in the past or what has been the financial performance of the company in the current year. But certain investors might be interested in the future of the company, and thus if the investors are interested in the future of the company, the and if the entity provides them the required risks and opportunities about the future, then the potential investors might think about investing their money in the company. ये बोल देंगे। आ जाओ, आ जाते हैं इस पे। Importance of optimal level of disclosures. It is important that financial statements are relevant and understandable. Excessive disclosures can obscure relevant information. ये अपन ने बोला था. This makes it harder for users to find the key points about performance of the business and its prospects for long-term success. An item is material if omitting, misstating, or obscuring it will influence the economic decisions of the users of the financial statements. The board feels that the poor application of materiality contributes to too much relevant information in the financial statements and not enough relevant information as such. They have issued a practice statement called Making Materiality Judgments. In the practice statement, the board reiterate that an entity only needs to apply the disclosure requirements in an IFRS standard if the resulting information is material. When making such decisions, an entity must consider common information needs of the primary user groups of its financial statements. अभी ये देखो इन्होंने कुछ कुछ पॉइंट्स डाले हुए हैं. When organizing the disclosure notes, entities should emphasize material matters. ये अपन ने बोला. Ensure material information is not obscured by immaterial information. ये भी अपन ने बोला कि immaterial information ज्यादा नहीं होनी चाहिए. Ensure that information is entity specific. ये भी अपन ने बोला था. Aim for simplicity and conciseness without omitting material detail. ओ ये वाला काफी अच्छा पॉइंट है, क्योंकि ऐसा होता है कि some investors might not be in the industry or might not have the same industrial business as the entity has, and thus providing the information in the most simplistic language, uh, with also covering the material matters, will provide them the best information and they can make their decisions like based upon that. Ensure formats are appropriate and understandable, which is table, list, narratives. Provide comparability. We didn't cover this. Provide comparability information. Comparison होना चाहिए and avoid duplication. I just took a screenshot of this. मुझे बाद में help करना है इसको, इसीलिए मुझे बाद में इससे हेल्प हो जाएगी. मतलब मैं इससे नोट्स वोट्स बनाऊंगा, तो इसलिए मैंने वो लेना था. Entities may sometimes need to provide additional disclosures not required by IFRS standards if necessary to help financial statement users understand the financial impact of its transactions during the period. ठीक है? So thanks much for watching. Bye.